Hey, hello everybody. My name is Kyle Smith. I'm the activity programmer at the Wellington County Museum. And on this beautiful day, I am in the also beautiful village of Aberfoyle, way down south, far south as you can go in the county of Wellington, in the township of Puslinch. And I am not brought here today to indulge in any of its tasty water, which is one of the things Aberfoyle is most known for today. I'm actually going to talk about one of its other liquid exports, something from 1933, and that is illegal whiskey. And believe it or not, when you are walking around this beautiful town, you are probably not thinking about figures like Al Capone or other mafia figures and underground illegal distilleries and prohibition and all of those things, but you really should, because one of the largest illegal distilling operations ever broken up in the province of Ontario took place right here, not too far away from where I'm standing right now, in this beautiful village of Aberfoyle. And I suppose if you're going to hide an illegal distilling operation, maybe having it in a nice village like Aberfoyle is maybe not a bad idea. Maybe you wouldn't get caught. Now, to tell the story properly, I should talk a little bit about Prohibition, and most of you are probably familiar with it already, if only from American movies. You watch the American movies and you see the gangsters and the Tommy guns and the FBI agents smashing bottles of whiskey and pouring them into the gutter, and all that is true, is a major part of the American experience. But what you might not realize is that it's also a major part of the Canadian experience. And we had Prohibition in this country too. We just didn't have it for quite as long. Prohibition in Canada starts during World War I and ends in the province of Ontario in 1927. So now this story here takes place in 1933. So Prohibition is already over here, but it's not in the United States. And what happens during Prohibition in Canada, just like in the United States, illegal distilling operations pop up. People start to make illegal operations for making their own whiskey and selling their own whiskey, making their own beer and selling their own beer. All of this starts taking place here in Ontario. Once Prohibition is over in 1927, these people are faced with a choice. They can go legal. They can stop breaking the law. They can start paying taxes to the government. They can apply for licenses, or they can just keep breaking the law like they already had been. And if they wanted to make even more money than that, they don't even just have to sell to the Canadian market, they can sell to the American market. Because as Prohibition is illegal in the United States, you can sell a bottle of whiskey down south for a lot more money than you could sell it for here. And that's what a lot of people did. And one of these men was from Aberfoyle. His name was by the name of Mr. Hewer. He owned a farm around here, and he had a massive illegal bootlegging operation. Now, the federal police, the Canadian government, they did not want this to happen. Number one, there's a lot of taxes going up the drain if it's going into the illegal economy. Number two, they don't want it to go to the United States. It's not making the country look very good. And so they're trying to break up as much of these illegal stills as possible. And they hear a rumor that Mr. Hewer on his farm, there's some sort of operation happening. So they're gonna go bust it up. They do a little investigating. They figure they know exactly when the best time to bust it up is. And they send 3 police cars. They go screaming into Mr. Hewer's operation. They start looking around, but they don't actually see anybody. There's nobody around, but they keep snooping, they keep looking around, and eventually they find a secret trapdoor underneath his haymow in his barn. And they creak it open. They go down into the spooky ladder. They go all the way down, and they find one man surrounded by thousands and thousands of gallons of illegal whiskey. This man is right about to light a match to start another still to make another batch. From one look around, the police officers involved thought that the operation could have produced about 300 gallons of whiskey in a day, which is a massive amount, and they had thousands and thousands of gallons lying around all ready for export. Now, the poor guy, this is not Mr. Hewer, this is one of the employees, this poor guy who's lighting a match and he's about ready to work, he realizes that the jig is up. He shoots up the ladder as quick as he can, pushes his way past the police, and goes running into a nearby swamp. He disappears. He's never heard from again. The police are disappointed by this, but it's still a massive score. This is the largest illegal bootlegging operation that any of these police officers have ever seen before. This is a career-making opportunity. So now they start to do what you see in all of these movies. They are still going to have some fun with this. They take their big shiny axes, just like they do in the movies. They start smashing all the bottles. They start hitting into the vats. They start to break everything. Whiskey is flowing out the barn door. It's going into the swamp. It's getting into the creek. They're having all sorts of fun while they're doing this. But maybe they should have thought a little bit about the environmental impact of what they were doing. And, you know, maybe today we would have made them do an environmental impact assessment or something like that, and they didn't do it because all of that thousands of gallons of whiskey are flowing into the local creek, and it is all flowing past a lot of the local farms. And The local farmers started to realize what was happening when they looked outside and they noticed that all of their farm animals were acting a little peculiar. Supposedly, cows were jumping over fences like deers. They were rolling around in the ground. They were falling into each other. There's stories of cows trying to walk on their hind legs. There's a group of pigs that gets down into the creek and spends the rest of the day just sort of sleeping in the mud near there. They sound like pretty happy pigs to me. People think this is hilarious. They come out to watch. I guess the funniest thing, what people said was the funniest thing, is a flock of geese or ducks go down into the creek and then they start flying in circles. They start trying to walk on the water. They start acting a little bit ridiculous. This is, everyone thinks it's pretty funny. Everyone except for Mr. Hewer, who had his entire operation busted, and that would have been thousands and thousands of dollars worth of product that all of a sudden disappeared that was all ready for export. Now, he's arrested, he's brought before the courts, but to give you some sense of how serious people were taking this at the tail end of Prohibition, he is slapped with a very, I was going to say hefty, ironically hefty $200 fine for his efforts. And if you can imagine, he's making 300 gallons of whiskey in one day. $200 is a drop in the proverbial whiskey bottle for him. That's not really a big deal. Much more of a big deal would have been the loss of all of his product. Mr. Hewer never rebuilds his operation, at least as far as we know of. And probably he would not have, and that's just because in 1933, at the very tail end of 1933, the Americans also repeal Prohibition. Alcohol sales and alcohol consumption in the United States become legal again. He probably saw the writing on the wall. This is September 1933. December is when Prohibition is repealed. He would have known that the Americans were going to repeal Prohibition. It's not going to be worth a new investment in rebuilding his entire, distill. So, that's what happened to him. It is hard to imagine when you're walking around this beautiful town and visiting its nice shops or going to its nice restaurants to think about, gangsters and Al Capone and the Untouchables and all of the rest of that happening. But it did happen here. In fact, like I said, one of the largest, if not the largest illegal whiskey operation in Wellington County's history took place right here in Aberfoyle. So next time you're here visiting one of the restaurants, I would recommend please order a glass of whiskey, think about Mr. Hewer while you're doing it, and have yourself a good time. And I would just like to thank you all for listening, and I hope you, once the world calms down, come back to Aberfoyle for a visit, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.